So the White House just laid out its core strategy in what was a really candid interview. Today we're going to unpack the administration's entire agenda, everything from their hard line on immigration to their major push for lower interest rates. Let's get right into it.
The interview was absolutely filled with powerful and, well, at times what the press secretary herself called egregious language. So we're going to cut right through all that noise and get straight to the policy agenda they laid out.
We're breaking this whole thing down into 5 key areas. First, we'll look at their vision for unity, then their pretty tough stance on immigration, their economic game plan, a political fight that's brewing right now, and finally, a little peek at what's next on their to-do list.
Okay, first up, let's dig into what the administration actually means when they talk about unifying the country. I mean, it's a goal you hear from politicians all the time, right? But the definition they gave here is very specific.
So, how are they defining unity? Well, according to the press secretary, it's not about big speeches or rhetoric. Nope, it's a much more down-to-earth approach. It's focused on just 2 things, making you feel safe in your community and financially secure at home.
And the interview really broke this down into 3 core pillars. 1, creating safe communities. 2, putting more money back into people's pockets. And 3, making the American dream feel like something you can actually achieve again. They're saying this is the foundation of their whole unification strategy.
That focus on safety, well, it leads us directly into what was probably the most contentious part of the whole interview, the administration's really hardline stance on immigration and law enforcement.
A central theme that came up over and over was this unwavering commitment to deporting non-citizens who've committed crimes here in the U.S. And this wasn't just presented as a policy, it was framed as a core promise they made to voters.
And they were very specific and used some highly charged language here. The administration isn't just talking about deporting criminals in a general sense. They're really focusing on who they call the most despicable individuals, to really underscore the threat they believe these people pose.
Then the interview painted this really stark contrast. On one side, you have ICE and Border Patrol agents being praised as true patriots, and on the other side, the administration is pointing to what it calls dangerous rhetoric from their opponents, specifically setting comparisons of these agencies to the Nazi Gestapo.
The administration then drew a direct line from this kind of egregious language, as they put it, to real-world consequences. They're arguing it's not just politics, it's rhetoric that they believe directly incites violence against federal agents.
And to back up their argument for these policies, the interview cited a pretty big data point, that newly released data shows murder rates in the country are at a record low. This was presented as clear-cut evidence that their law and order approach is actually working.
All right, let's shift gears now from security over to the economy. The conversation really pivoted to what the administration is claiming as major economic wins, especially on inflation, and what they want to see happen next.
So here's the central economic claim they made in the interview: a massive turnaround on inflation. The press secretary said that the core annualized rate has just plummeted from a high of 9% under the last administration all the way down to just 1.4% now. That's a huge drop.
And this is the critical part. The administration is taking this win on inflation and using it as leverage. Their argument is pretty simple. Look, our policies worked, so now it's time for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates and give the American people a break.
But to get that done, they need to install a new Federal Reserve chairman, a role that has enormous influence over interest rates. And this is where the interview revealed a pretty big snag. And it's coming from inside the president's own party.
At the heart of this whole thing is the nominee, Kevin Warsh. The White House, based on what the press secretary said, sees him as a highly qualified and distinguished economist, someone with an exceptional resume for the job.
But here's the standoff. One of the administration's own senators, Thom Tillis, is blocking the nomination, and the White House's response is, well, blunt. They're accusing the senator of holding the economy hostage, and they say their plan is just to push forward and get Warsh confirmed as quickly as they can.
And finally, the interview wrapped up with a little preview of the administration's schedule, which gives us a really clear picture of their immediate priorities.
Yeah, the focus for the coming week stays squarely on the economy. On the agenda, you've got meetings with leaders from the finance and crypto industries, new announcements coming on drug pricing, and just more economic news in general, all while getting ready for another trip to go speak directly to the American people.
So, when you put it all together, the key takeaway is this really clear 2-pronged strategy. Project strength on the border and crime, while at the same time claiming a huge victory on the economy. The administration is basically betting that this 1-2 punch of security and prosperity is the winning message. The question is, will voters agree?